of the AMATS Policy Committee to order. I will do a roll call. Ms. Day, Baldwin Day.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm here and walking in. We'll be in just a minute.
Oh, okay. Mr. Downey.
Ken. Mr. Kohlhaas.
My goodness, I'm sorry. I'm just going through.
Mr. Kohlhaas is here.
Frank here. Mr. Bolin.
Here.
Okay, so we do have a quorum. Aaron, any public involvement announcements?
Just a second. So welcome to the AMATS Policy Committee meeting. Public comments are welcome and encouraged with 3 minutes given to each speaker. After the committee discusses each item, members of the public will be invited to comment. Housekeeping items for virtual attendees, please keep your cameras off unless speaking. For those attending by phone, please press *6 to mute or unmute yourself. AMATS committee meetings are audio recorded and posted on the AMATS YouTube page. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, do we have approval of the agenda?
Approve the agenda.
For a second? Second. All right, any objections? All right, hearing none, agenda is approved. And moving on, agenda item 4, we have the minutes from April to May. April and May Policy Committee minutes for approval. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes from the April 16th and May 21st policy committee meetings.
Second.
And where was the second?
I think it was Voland. Member Voland.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. All right, any changes or discussion? Any objections to approving the minutes? Okay, hearing none, the April 16th and the May 21st minutes are approved. Action item 5A, this is AMATS funding program, transportation improvement program, administrative modification number 7. Aaron, is this you presenting?
Yes, this is me presenting. So before you is the admin mod number 7. This is just making some small changes throughout the program that'll go through the Gamble Street utility pole removal and increased lighting, adding design funding in FY26 for $750,000 for the VRU codes. This was captured as part of admin mod 5, but it was missed when we were updating amendment number 4 to reflect admin mod 5. That's why we typically don't do admin mods and amendments at the same time, because it can get a little confusing for everybody. Next one is the Gamble and Ingo Streets. I apologize. This should have shown the track changes on here, but there was a change here. It was originally reflecting that it was going to remove a portion of the HSIP funding from AC to just regular HSIP funding code. But at the TAC meeting, there was a change that was brought forward to just remove the AC entirely from the project. So that project is not being funded with AC funds. Next, Toot Road, Baxter to Patterson Street channelization, increased funding in FY25 by about $293,000, as well as updating the funding codes to remove NHPP and STBG and add HSIP. So those HSIP requests came from DOT. Next, we have Table 9, Transit. So there are 4 changes here that came from the Public Transportation Department to reflect their recent match letter, their split letter. So I'll go through those. There is the 5307 preventative maintenance. There was 2.75 million increase. There's the 5307 fleet replacement and expansion. There's a 1.954 million increase. Fleet improvements for 5307. There is a increase in FY25 of 786,000. And then the 5339 has an increase, 2 increases, one in 26 for 700. Well, for a small amount, sorry, a couple $100,000 each, one in 25 and 26 for a total of 288,000. So these changes were reviewed by the Technical Advisory Committee and are recommended by staff and the TAC for approval of admin mod number 7. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the committee?
I do have a question, actually. Mr. Yoganailan, where the the fleet replacement and expansion funding, the 1.954 million, where is that coming from to account for the fiscal constraint of the program?
So basically what happens is a chunk of funding comes in from FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, for transit-related type projects. For the Anchorage area, there are two recipients, the railroad and the Public Transportation Department for the municipality of Anchorage. So they get together and they do a split letter, and Kate, correct me if I'm wrong, but they do a split letter that says how that funding is going to be split between the two entities. They recently did that split letter, updated it, and it looked like some additional funding was made available for the Public Transportation Department. So that's where that funding is coming from.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions, comments from the committee? Any comments from the public?
Not online.
Okay. What's the flow of the committee?
Move to recommend admin mod number 7 with the changes listed in the memo before us.
I'll second.
Supposed to move to approve, isn't it?
Yes.
Not just recommending, we're moving to approve. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Are there any objections to approving the motion? Okay, hearing
I do
none?
have a question, Chair. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
My mic was turned off. This is Member Voland. Is it possible, I'm trying to get to the materials from our email. This doesn't have, as part of this admin mod, the termini of the Hyder pedestrian boulevard. Does it? Is that on a different item, Aaron?
Oh, about changing the termini of the
Yeah.
Hyder pedestrian boulevard? Yeah, that is not part of this. That would be part of the MTP, the next item.
Okay, perfect. All right, that was my only question. Thanks.
Okay, so any objections to approving the motion? Hearing none, the AMATS Transportation Improvement Program Administrative Modification number 7 is approved. Going on to item 5B, the AMATS Transportation Plan, MTP 2052. Aaron, are you presenting on this?
No, this will be Rhiannon.
Hello, Rhiannon Brown, MTP coordinator for AMATS. Before you, we have the draft project list and the fiscal assumptions for the 2052 MTP. We are recommending, we are asking for your review and approval of the list with the TAC recommendations from the meeting last week. To give some background on this update in these project lists. So we are currently working through the 2052 update. For the projects, we have pulled forth all the projects that are still relevant from the 2050 plan, since they have already been scored with our performance measures and goals. So we've pulled those through, and then we also had a couple additional projects brought up in the work session that happened on May 18th. Those were incorporated, any suggestions were incorporated from the May 18th meeting work session. We brought the list to the Technical Advisory Commission last week, or committee, last week, and they put forth a number of changes to projects within all of the project lists. For the revenue and project cost assumptions, we've used historical information as well as information provided by all entities involved, the railroad, people mover, DOT, and the municipality. We use those numbers to capture the revenue within the TIP cycle or within the MTP cycle. So on the second page of the document here, you have the project costs for each category. Complete streets and active transportation are combined together, and then you have railroad and transit combined. So this shows the project costs that are within the TIP term, within short term, which is 2031 to 2041, and then the long term, which is 2042 to 2052. On the third page, you have information about the methodology for determining project costs. We use the project costs that are put forth in revenue are in 2026 dollars. We apply a 4.5% inflation to projects that are in the short term and a 3.4% inflation to projects that are in the long term. The revenue gets a steady 2.4 inflation starting in the short term. So on page 3, you have the remaining revenue from the updated project list without the TAC recommendations for your review. This shows how much each entity has available if they do in the short and the long term. So as I mentioned, there are a number of changes that were proposed or updates that were proposed by the Technical Advisory Committee. And I don't know if it would be best to go through those just one by one or open it up to you all to decide what you want to discuss the most and kind of okay the others. But before you is the draft list, the constrained project list and fiscal assumptions for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Any question or comments from the committee?
I would actually be interested to hear you work through, Ms. Brown, the changes that were suggested or the updates that were suggested by the TAC.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So some of these were changes that were brought forth from the committee members. A few of them were changes that I just missed going through everything in the first place. So there are some explanations if they're when necessary. So we'll start with the complete streets list. And this is to add the Sewer to Glen Pell project. That's the 16th Avenue extension. And that's a $10.5 million project. The second is to add the Sewer to Glen Pell project, the Port of Alaska Freight Route Reconnaissance Engineering Study. These were two projects that I should have captured in the list prior because we had spoken about the Pell projects in the work session and I just missed these. The next one is to remove the project on line 144. That's Complete Streets 198, Lake Otis Parkway at 20th Avenue. That portion of the work that was going to be completed and that is now going to be folded into CPS 129, which is going to include the intersection at 20th. The next is to update project line 145, street project 129. As I just discussed, it's to one of the changes is to include intersection work, and the other change is to remove the verbiage to increase capacity and replace it with evaluate row reallocation. The next update is to project on line 137, Complete Streets Project 21, and it's to update the termini from Denali Street to Lake Otis Parkway, and then to update the timeline from long-term to short-term and increase the project to 50,000. The next is to increase the budget for project on line 89, TIP NHS 1, increase from 32 million to 80 million. The next increase projects on line 54 through 56. This is to increase the budget for support for a new position at approximately 175,000 per year. So I have it listed how it would have fallen into the TIP, the short term and the long term there for a total of 4.2 million. This one, we do ask specific instruction of if we were to move forward on this, what should come out of AMATS funding to accommodate this total. And then finally, within Complete Streets was an ask to include Safer Seward Highway suite of placeholder projects without the financial analysis at this time. Or I guess we did receive a letter earlier today with that part of that analysis. The next category is the non.
Can I pause you there?
Yeah.
So for number 7, what are the options as far as where the funding for that staff position, the new staff position could come from?
So that's
Our choices.
Yeah, so our choices are going to be essentially AMATS You're gonna have to take from AMATS funded projects that are within that timeline. So we do have it broken up. There's the TIP timeline, the short term and the long term. So we would need, or you all would need to find that the 700,000 within the TIP term and then the 1.75 within the longer short term from other AMATS projects. So we would have to either borrow or eliminate from others, but typically within that same timeline, but we can kind of shuffle things around.
And is that specific action or clarity that we need today, or is that a future us conversation?
No, that would be for today to complete the fiscal analysis for this.
Okay.
Any other complete streets questions before I move on to?
So I guess following up on Ms. Day's question, so for that, the new position, that can come from any of the AMATS funds, doesn't the complete streets, the non-motorized, it come from any project?
Sorry, it would need to come from complete streets. Mhm. Thank you for that specification, yes. So many layers to play with here. The next section is the non-motorized section. The first two were mistakes on my behalf. These were duplicated projects that were already in complete streets. So they just need to be removed. The funding is not affected with that. The funding that we have in here is the correct funding. The line number 3 to update projects on line 15 and 16 to update the termini to 15th Avenue, 15th and 9th Avenue to match the Pell project. This was a previous project that was from 15th to 5th. And now with the additional Hyder projects, I believe they decided to update the termini based on the type of work that was in each. The type of work from 5th to 9th was going to be a lot different than 15th to 9th or from 5th to 3rd. The next one is to add a new Hyder pedestrian boulevard projects to match the Pell. And again, these 3 projects.
Member Volant has his hand up. Oh,
Member Boland?
sorry.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I think we're gonna get in a little bit here to what my question pertains to, which is the updated termini on Hyder, the Hyder project. I was surprised to see this come through because all of the public process that I've seen has been on the termini being at from 15th to 5th. And I guess I'm just wondering how this recommendation came forward would be one question. I haven't seen this through the Pell process personally, and I don't know that the community is really aware of this from a public process point of view, this proposal to change the termini. I'm a little concerned about this because it strikes me that, you know, if there is the will to adjust that, we could do that later rather than segmenting it at this point. And I think my final question would be, has there been any engagement with the Reconnecting Fairview project, the actual community members who are doing that project, which is augmenting the Pell on this proposal?
So these projects, they came about from the work session and the Pell projects to do Hyder from Chester to Campbell, or from Chester Creek to Ship Creek. Some of these projects were ones that I missed in the initial review. And so AMATS had already had the Hyder project that was 5th to 15th. And then the Pell had 3 projects that were Chester Creek to 15th, 15th to 9th, and then 9th to Ship Creek, I believe. And so the thought of the technical advisory committee, like I previously touched on, was to break that up in sections based on the type of work and the extensive work that was going to need to be done. Like I heard from 9th to 5th is going to be a little bit of a bigger beast than, say, Ship Creek to 15th. As far as I know about I don't know about the connecting Fairview piece of this because we are just taking this project out of the, from the Pell. And trying to match what we already have to what they are planning for.
Okay, so I think a lot of the public comments that we've garnered, if I'm not mistaken, have been made to us under the understanding of 15th to 5th. And I think it's a problem if we are not engaging the reconnecting community or reconnecting Fairview folks on this and making them aware, because that is the community-led effort. And so I know that we'll go to community member comments and then circle back to us, but I guess I will just flag that I'd like to take a little bit more time with this and explain to the community what is being proposed here before we take action on this piece of this item. Thanks.
Follow-up question to Mr. Mullins' question. Is there a downside or are there negative ramifications if this is not adopted and it stays as initially programmed at 15th to 5th?
So the PEL is actually recommending a different termini for these projects than what we have in our MTP right now. So we would need to make a decision of, do we match the PEL, which is those 3 phases? I think it's Chester to 15th is the southern phase. Then it's 15th to 9th is the middle phase. And then the northern phase is 9th to Ship Creek. Yeah, thank you. So during that discussion, the TAC was like, well, wait a minute, the 9th to 5th piece is pretty challenging. So let's break that out as a separate project that can get done quicker than if you include it as part of the bigger piece from 9th to Ship Creek. So if you guys don't want to do that, we would still need to update our MTP to reflect what is in the PEL, which is those 3 segments.
So question about that, our the A, B, and C that are reflected here, there's nothing between 15th and 9th. Chester Creek to 15th. And then 9th to 5th.
Is number 3 above that?
Got it.
The termini and the tip.
Oh, okay.
15th to 9th.
I'm tracking. Thank you.
It was like a separate entity, so
Yeah.
it's.
Thank you. No, I'm with it. Thank you also.
I think Member Boland has his hand up still.
Member
thank
Boland?
you. Oh, yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't know that it's a bad idea, to have it segmented and do projects sort of one at a time, what can go forward first and be done in a more expedient manner. I really think this project, zooming out, Gamble and Ingra and what we're going to do with Hyder, setting community expectations has been really important all along, and engaging the community. I guess I would just like this to be explained to the folks in Fairview who have been engaged, not only with the Reconnecting Fairview, but also with the Pell, that this is being proposed and why. Like I kind of feel like we owe an explanation to the public before we kind of move forward on this. It's a very sensitive project, as I think a lot of folks are well aware. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Not that I don't think that there's a merit in breaking up to chunks, but just being able to have that public conversation first.
Thank you.
I want to keep going through the changes.
Number 5 is to, the next 2 action items are to move specific projects out of the non-motorized to make funding available for those additional Hyder projects. So specifically lines 97 through 114 would move into non-program, so it wouldn't be in the list. And then the lines below are a bit piecemealed, but those would move from short-term to long-term. again, to accommodate the new Pell projects for the Hyder pedestrian boulevard. The next change is for transit. This was my mistake. It's just to remove projects on lines 13 through 17 because they were duplicated. And then my apologies to the railroad for leaving out corporation in this. It was a hasty update. But for the Alaska Railroad, it says number 1 is to zero out the cost for line 2. The second is to increase the cost of project on line 6. And the third is to decrease the project on line 10. And all of these are the final numbers for those decreases or increases. And then the final 2 are to remove 2 projects.
Very basic question. I'm probably not understanding it, but so the proposal to drop projects 97 through 114 to fund Hyder. I guess I'm a little confused because item 3 under non-motorized reduces the updates the termini from 15th to 5th to 15th to 9th. So it's reducing the length.
That's in one section of the full Hyder. So the Pell project has the greater Hyder project within it. The MTP already had a smaller portion of Hyder, 15th to 5th. And so that 15th to 5th is what we are suggesting to reduce the termini and 8. And then the moving out of the non-motorized projects allows funding for those other 2
Ship
projects.
Chester.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm a little concerned about the movement of the Northern Lights Boulevard at Lois Drive crossing. Moving that to not programmed, that feels like a really, I know that it's not a full deletion, but that's a really significant piece of our pedestrian infrastructure, especially for safe routes to schools and kids getting to Romig and West safely. So I think that's the only thing that makes me go, ooh, just a little bit, because that's a place that bridge is in rough condition. So.
And just to give you a background on how we came up with those projects, we essentially just went based on the project score and took the bottom scoring projects of the long term and the short term based on how much funding we needed out of the program. So those are just our suggestions based on the funding. So that is up to the will of the committee. There's another project of similar costs that could be swapped out. That would be up to you all.
Yes.
Just a comment, I guess, kind of carrying on what Ms. Baldwin Day said. Probably a little poor planning on my part, but those changes in particular, 97 through 114, I see other projects in there that are feel very important to pedestrian safety. And so making a wholesale decision now to drop 20 projects in support of the very highly needed Hyder project is a challenging. So it's not a question, it's a comment. It's a challenging proposition to make in this meeting.
I respect that. It is a challenging because everything is needed and it's
Yeah.
frustrating.
That's not a criticism.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm with you.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of potentially weighty decisions that are being asked of us right now the determination about where to find funding for staff and where to remove funding from the Complete Streets program, the making space for the Hyder project. These feel like things that merit some time and consideration, and I I will confess, I don't feel like I have done my homework to an appropriate level to be able to opine on that in an intelligent way, right this minute. Maybe if I had 30 minutes of silence to do a deep dive, I could get there, but I don't know that we have time for that. So I'm wondering what our options are. I know that there's Mr. Young and Allen or Ms. Brown, if you could maybe tell us a little bit about, I realize that we're on a timeline to get this out to the community for comment. What other choices do we have, in terms of being able to sit with this for a bit longer?
So we have a long-term deadline that we need to meet. We need to make sure we get our MTP done by December 29th of 2026. So this year, it's a federal requirement for us to get it updated with our new boundary. So that's the deadline we're pushed up against. We have 45 days. We have to do a public comment period. It's required in our public participation plan that it is 45 days because it goes to the assembly and things like that. So working backwards, that is November, part of November, October, November, basically, or no. Because November, we need to do the work. So it's October. It's September, October that we put it out for the public comment period.
Okay, and then bring it back to you all or in the TAC for approval, final approval in November. We sort of built in a one scant month. Ideally, we'd like to bring it in November because if you have changes, then we have time to make them by December.
Well, I mean, so basically, if we release it for starting for September, public comment period, it'd be September and then most of October. And then we would do our work as staff to respond to the public comments. We'd have to then, depending on the changes, we'd have to bring them to the committees for decision on what to do. And then we'd have to make those changes through any of the modeling work that we have to do. So even with our schedule we have now, we may not even make it. So, I understand this is a weighty decision, but we have strict deadlines we have to adhere to. So that's what we as staff are trying to get for you guys.
That being said, on strict deadlines, it did seem like there were some opportunities there to still have comprehensive and thorough conversation on things ahead of it going out for public comment. I do wonder if the committee would be willing to have a special committee if that helped with timelines. Once we were able to go through, we could not just have our monthly meetings, but we can call back, right? If there's majority agreement.
Yeah, just keep in mind that we also have to do our modeling. We have to do our air quality conformity demonstration, and then we have to bring it all back for you guys. So that time, we don't really have extra time, just kind of being as blunt as I can with you all, to spend that long delaying. Because it's going to take probably 3 weeks for modeling, depending on when we get it done. And then we have the air quality conformity demonstration, which also requires the interagency consultation. That takes time to get everybody together, get it reviewed, get it done. Not insurmountable, but it does take time that we need to recognize, and then bringing it back to you all. So even getting it released for starting September public comment period, we have to come to you in August to get it released. And then July is the month to do the modeling.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think one of the things we want to avoid is staff having to do rework. And if we're making decisions ahead of what we think is going to be publicly agreeable, that means you're going to have to go back and do the rework. And now we're later on in the planning process. So I do concur with some of the other comments. I think postponing or tabling actual action item voting may be helpful, especially if we can commit to a working session before next meeting, perhaps, to go through it and ensure we have the questions answered or we're able to solicit feedback as needed. I'd be curious from other committee members what your thoughts would be on that approach.
What is our public notice requirement?
7 days.
I work in the same building as all of you, so I want to stay on your good side, but and I value our working relationship. So it seems that
Way to butter it up.
it seems like there are a couple of options, one of which would be to postpone the vote on this to the July meeting, which is a month, but I realize that impacts your timeline significantly. So I wanted, have another suggestion would be as Chair Keith said, a interim meeting, a special meeting. And I'm wondering if a special meeting in 2 weeks or the regular meeting let me start with this. Is the regular meeting in 4 weeks, is that absolutely undoable? Is that timeline unachievable? And I guess I would also ask, as part of your answer, if you could describe to the best of your abilities the implications of not meeting the December 29 deadline.
I'll start with the deadline. My understanding, we don't fully know all of the impacts because it's never happened. So we're kind of in uncharted territory here. My understanding, talking with FHWA, is that it would freeze the federal funding in our area, our boundary. So no new phases, no new projects started. I think existing projects could continue to move forward, could continue to expend with the funding that they have, but everything new would be on hold until we get the MTP updated, however long that takes. Just recognize it has a ripple effect. Even a delay in getting funding obligated for a project can push it out into future construction years, as we're seeing with things right now. In terms of if the July 16th is completely undoable, we don't know. We've been trying to contact the consultant to get them to tell us if it is undoable or not. If there is a desire, I understand, maybe we could move the policy committee meeting up a week to the 9th of July, if that works. And the reason I'm being reluctant is because we also have other stuff that we need to get approved in July. So this is not the only thing we have. So we're just compounding stuff. So our meetings will be busy. So we got to remember that if we move it July 9th, we have the TAC on the 2nd. So staff is going to have to post everything as soon as the TAC meeting is done for all the other stuff we have to do in addition to this.
Which is what happened this sequence.
Which is what happened this time, unfortunately.
A follow-up question then?
Yes.
The risk of federal funding freezing on January 1st, does that unfreeze when this process is done? So if this didn't get put in the bag and done until January 29th, is it just frozen until January 29th? Is it frozen for the calendar year? Do we know?
I don't know.
Uncharted territory.
Yeah, if I may, we typically do have a Federal Highways representative on the meetings. Could we see if they're available to comment on that? I can't quite see the list of who's
I
on.
do not see any of them on right now. I have asked for something from FHWA on what the repercussions are. And at this point, I believe they don't know, and they won't know until it happens.
It's not encouraging.
And I will say, we don't know if this impacts just us. You have to remember that everything that we do flows into the STIP.
We have been eagerly working through the boundary change conversation in advance of having an MTP required at the end of the year. So I would just encourage us, if we don't think we're going to meet that deadline, that we start right away communicating with our Alaska division and just inform them and let them know. And I know they'll be eager to provide us with assistance to help us get through that process. They've already stated as much. They've been helping the MPOs out with MTPs, including with MVP. So I think what's important is that we're confident about the decisions that we're making and we're not rushing into it, because these are big decisional documents. And rushing into decisions now, requiring then later rework, I think is a disservice both to staff and the public. So we can be committed to be working through these decisions with people, but and then simultaneously mitigate the schedule delays if we're concerned about that. But one thing I'd like to request is just a Gantt chart of the process, because we can typically look at that when we're preparing our planning documents and seeing what we can do in parallel or overlap, or if consultants are busy, which we know they are, perhaps there's additional support that can be provided through the state or some of our term agreements. And maybe there's things that we can do to be helping each other better through the process. But a Gantt chart would be helpful so we better understood that. Even a table. Doesn't have to be a Gantt chart.
I personally would be fine to schedule a special meeting in advance of our meeting on the, what is it?
16th.
I'd be very happy to do that. I will say that assembly members will have a conflict on the 9th. That is when our rules and governance committee meets as a committee of the whole. So that's not really an option. However, I would be very open to coordinating schedules so that we could do something inside of the next 10 days. I think there's a bit of a sense of urgency here to get this moving, and I for one would be very happy to do that.
I'm going to go ahead and point out, staff's going to be out of the office for some of that. It is the July 4th holiday weekend, so other people will be out as well. We are also doing our MPO quarterly meeting up in Fairbanks next week. So there is some conflicts with staff timing. I'm looking at the week of the 6th, July 6th. How does Wednesday work for everybody on the 8th? Or Tuesday?
I would prefer not to do Tuesday. That's an assembly meeting day. So
Yes.
if you would be so kind as to not schedule. Yeah, I that would be one way to watch me explode on the dais. That Wednesday looks fantastic in my world. I don't know about others, but yeah, the Wednesday the 8th is great. My book.
And to clarify, is this a working session so that we can go through materials ahead of making an action item? And maybe a quick question beyond that, if it is a working session, it seems like the next step beyond consensus from the policy committee is more modeling. So if we could get to consensus in a working document, that would give you more confidence in that session of modeling. You could start working on that, correct? And then we
Not
have
really, no.
actual follow-up by vote at the regularly scheduled meeting.
The problem is if we start the consultants down the modeling path and you guys change something at the next meeting, then we will have to go back and redo some of the things. So
I think if it was a dedicated meeting where we were going to be making some decisions, I mean, really, I just would like a little more time to sit with this and candidly, we also had a document land in our emails this morning, which I have yet to have an opportunity to read because I've been in committee all day. So I think there are many things that I would just like more time to sit with. I think I could be prepared to come and make a decision in 10 days time or something like that, a couple of weeks. And so I would be in favor of a special meeting where we're actually making concrete decisions and giving staff the direction that they need to be able to move forward.
we can, shoot me, I'm just trying to give options. We also have July 1st is an option if you want to move it up even sooner. That Wednesday may be an opportunity. Staff won't be as available, so it may just have to be me, depending on who's here. So we'll figure that out, but that could be the 1st or the 8th for Wednesdays.
Maybe those are available on my calendar.
Often, the 8th would work for my calendar.
It would be better.
Member Boland, did you have a preference on what day would work best for you?
I believe I can make, let me pull up one thing real quick. I'm jumping between calendars here. July 8th. Yes, I can make the 8th work. Yep.
Okay, is there a time that works best for you guys? It looks like this room is taken from 1 to 2 that day. Would 2 o'clock onward be fine? Because then we'd have plenty of time for hours to spend on this item.
Personal preference, I would say, would be in the morning if possible, but I will flex to meet the needs of the committee.
There's a managers meeting in here from 9 to 10:30. We could do it after that.
We can move the manager meeting.
If you'd like to, we can start at 9 a.m.
I bet we have people in the room.
In the dark. Okay, if that's is moved, then we can start as early as 9 a.m. on the 8th if you guys would like. It's up to what you guys want to do.
Okay, can someone make a motion, please?
I if it's all right, and I can be really high minutes, so.
Just a second.
You do.
We have to do public comment before we actually make a motion on this. Unless you're gonna table it, I think, or something. Because isn't there an opportunity to table it before you do public comment?
I guess what I'd prefer to do is let's first table the motion. If you certainly want public comment for anyone that did come to testify on these projects, would be excellent. Thanks for taking the time to be here. So to sequence of operations, you'd prefer to table it and then have public comment, or public comment first?
Yeah, if you're looking for public comment, we might as well do public comment now and then do the motion to move it to the July, or set up a special meeting and then move it to that particular item.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. I definitely want to hear from the public.
Member Volland, stand up.
Yeah, just before we go to the public comment, I guess my one request leading up to July 8th is that AMATS or someone, I suppose, either from AMATS staff or the municipality would make an effort to engage with the Reconnecting Fairview project, just to kind of let them know what's being considered here. I can also try to do my part to reach out to them as well, but I think that would be helpful. Thanks.
You can go ahead and do that while we're waiting. We can reach out to the groups and let them know. I think we have a meeting coming up soon anyways, so we'll be able to.
Much
contact them.
appreciated. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you.
Excellent. So how about comments from the public on the MTP and projects proposed and actions proposed within this item?
May I ask a question, Chair? Did Ms. Brown make it through the entire, did we make it through Transit and the Railroad? I believe we did. I just want to make sure. Okay,
We
thank you.
got a little less interesting.
Thank you, Chair.
Don't let Bart hear you.
It's not important. Very important.
Okay, we do have a hand up online, Lindsay.
Okay, Lindsay, please go ahead.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I'm Lindsay Hyduk. I serve as the Director of Community Engagement and External Affairs at NeighborWorks Alaska, and I do serve and work closely with the Fairview Community Council on the Reconnecting Fairview project. So thank you, Mr. Volland, for raising this. We are excited to see the opportunity to have some of these big Fairview projects to finally address the highway connection. And we have been in communication with the Pell project team to get a better understanding of the different termini that are being proposed here. We've been working with the project phasing slightly different with that 5th to 15th project phasing, and there could be a potential change there, but appreciate that the policy committee may be taking some more time to consider it so that we can all get on the same page on this. And then to the comments around non-motorized project table overall, I am a really big advocate for pedestrian and bicycle safety and really appreciate being thoughtful on this, and would really just stress that the committee can allocate funds between buckets. The Complete Streets projects funds could support non-motorized projects that are priorities for our community. I am not sure about the funding implications for the Safer Seward project. I think there might be a handout there that I'm not seeing online quite yet. And so having more time to really focus in on our priorities as a community, especially at a time where we have such high collisions, fatalities for people on our roadways, it's really important. So just appreciate having some additional time and really stress that non-motorized improvements are a huge priority for our Reconnecting Fairview effort, for our community as a whole. So thank you.
Thank you. Question, any comments in the room?
No other hand raised online.
Okay. I think our next Action was, if we choose to table item 5B to a special session.
I have an order of operations question. Do we need to ask for a special session and then table the item to that session? Is that the appropriate order of things?
I mean, you just put it as the main motion instead if you recommend tabling it to, an example could be a motion to table it to a special meeting on July 8th at 9 a.m. Staff will set up the details, however you want to phrase it out, because there's currently no motion on the table. You don't have to delay or move.
Well, in that case, I would like to move that we table this item to Wednesday, July 8th. I'm going to ask for 10 a.m. because if the assembly meeting the night before goes until midnight, I would love to not have to be here at 9. And ask staff to please do the work to set up that meeting.
Second the motion, although the schedule of the assembly meeting is in your group's control.
Not always, sir. Sometimes it is very much out of our hands.
I second the motion.
See what you did there.
With editorial comment.
Any further discussion on the committee?
Yeah, I actually do want to know one thing. I think I would have been interested in tabling and in taking this action, regardless of the adjustments that are being made in the tables. If for no other reason than the arrival of this document this morning. And I do want to say that I think it's really important that if we're going to do good collaborative work together, we really need to have all of the information before us to be able to make good decisions. And it makes it really hard to do that when we're getting really important content day of. And I also understand, I watched back the TAC meeting and there was a similar request made at the TAC meeting. So I just want to draw a line under that it's really critical that we have, especially information of this magnitude, well in advance of meetings so that we can make thoughtful choices and not be doing things last minute. So I just wanted to put that on record that's really, really important, I think, as we're making weighty decisions going forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any objections to approving the motion on the floor? Okay, hearing none. Motion is approved to table action item 5B to a special session, July 8th, 10 a.m.
We'll go ahead and get that set up soon. I can't guarantee tomorrow since it's a holiday, but we will get set up in time for it.
Okay. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to staff. Excellent information. Very thorough walking through it. Appreciate all the work on this. Okay, the next action item is 5C, INL Street Rehabilitation Project. Aaron, are you initiating this?
Just really quickly, I know the project team is here to give a presentation. Just as a reminder, this was an AMATS pavement replacement project that was moved out by the policy committee to be its own standalone rehabilitation project. And the project team is here to talk about that today. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Take it away.
Hey, good afternoon. Ryan Harris, Department of Transportation, Interim Project Manager for the AMATS on I Street Potential Rehabilitation Project. And with me today is Lounsbury, Joe Taylor, Scott Polis. Joe will lead us through the presentation and address any comments or questions that you guys may have afterwards.
Great. Thanks so much. Good afternoon. Thanks for having us. I'm going to go through these first slides pretty quickly. You've seen the upfront presentation here about a year ago. We were here talking about the former pavement preservation projects for INL. And I'm going to just remind everybody real quick what those were about, and then give you the update on where we are. And then we have an ask here at the end. So L&I from 3rd to 5th were originally envisioned as a pavement preservation project. About a year ago, we were here telling you about all the things we found when we were in the field that sort of reinforces why we had a preservation project. Ruts, broken infrastructure, things that you can see on the screen here in terms of rutting and roughness. The next picture is just a picture of I Street. We're talking about a mile long on these roads, 10 to 12,000 vehicles per day on the couplet. They're one-way streets. and some pretty deep rutting, for example, is what we were talking about. So on our next slide, we were just come to you after we had completed a bunch of work in the summer. We did ADA assessments, found like 110 curb ramps that failed for ADA compliance on grades and warning tiles, a number of broken stuff. So we were presenting on that, a bunch of deficiencies that we had identified. So on the next slide, we were here, sort of the big purpose of our presentation last time was to say, all right, we have this pavement preservation project. We've surveyed it. We looked at all the curb ramps. Here's all the things we found. And this is what a pavement preservation project would look like cost-wise for both I or L. But what we were reporting out on is that while we were working on the job, both the city and the state started asking questions about, hey, what might we be able to do that's sort of within the spirit of a pavement preservation project that would allow us to do a little bit more and really come up with a betterment. And so we were asked to do 3 different options and kind of come up with a menu of alternatives. And so our next slide, we were presenting on this option that said, okay, we can do the basic pavement preservation. In addition to that, we can do some ADA upgrades. So we found some driveways that didn't meet grades, sidewalks that weren't wide enough. We worked with the city and the state on some audible push button locations where we might enhance some crossings. And we said, boy, that's a little bit more, but we can do this great thing. And then our next menu option here, option 3, was sort of, what if we did that, but went just a little bit further? And there were some select locations where the city and the state were interested in cameras, radar detection, flashing yellow arrow. We sort of worked through those intersection by intersection and came up with this incremental improvement, costed it, and presented on that. Here in this picture, you can see, for example, we have a load center on a signal pole, which is kind of a hazard for obvious reasons, a big electrical box, right, that could be crashed into. So we identified a bunch of those items, and that was our option 3. And then on option 4, this one was a little bit, kind of a pivot or a change in a pavement preservation project. But we said, within the limits of the existing curb, could we repurpose, re-envision, and maybe reallocate the right-of-way within this project to do something different? And what are the different things that we could do? And so we presented option 4 for both I and L, which was the pavement preservation, the ADA upgrades, the signal upgrades. But in this case, I and L, we looked at and examined removing a through lane of traffic and said, what are all the things that we could do if we had one more lane of space, and is that viable? So we sort of costed that option 4 for I and L, and we had presented that. Our next slide showed a little picture of what that would look like. Just as an example, typical section of what we might be able to do if we removed a lane. And at that point in the project, everybody realized, or everybody knew, but there was a formal recognition that there was a corridor study being undertaken, Minnesota Drive Corridor Study, which looked at I and L, and it was looking at it was a bigger look at what might be done on this project that we were kind of designing on. And so as you guys know, that was pulled out of the pavement preservation project. This design stopped, kind of pencils went down. It's at about 75% complete for the pavement preservation piece. And then this stopped while the corridor plan sort of moved through. So the big update today is the next slide here. The corridor plan, the department has developed that to draft format, shared that with our team. And we've been tasked with going through that plan and comparing it to the different menu options that we presented. And so this is a beautiful graphic that's coming out of that draft plan. It's looking at I Street, and it's not really a surprise, but the recommendations and the improvements and the details that are coming out of that plan dovetail really closely to what our option 4 alternative was. And so you can work through that graphic, but the big takeaway here for I Street, like the big item, was remove a lane. And then there's a lot of sign information, a lot of signal information, things of that sort. So the next slide, we didn't really present this last year, but the next slide is the design that was sort of developed to get to menu 4. And that's really what that corridor plan would look like at about the 30% design level. So there's a lot of information here, but on the next slide, we have this table. And so what we did is we went through the corridor plan that's been provided to us in draft. and we compared I Street recommendations versus what we laid out in our menu for design. And so a lot of check marks you kind of see here. The recommendations that are coming out of there are shown on the left in the black here. And then there's just a couple details on the right that we've highlighted. There's a few things in the corridor plan that weren't in the menu that we would just have to pivot and look at. A rectangular rapid flashing beacon, a pedestrian hybrid beacon, things of that nature. And then on the bottom of this, kind of the green thing, you can see the check marks on the right are things that were in the menu for items that we worked with the state and city on that were simply too detailed for a corridor plan. So we've got some extra improvements there that were in that menu for. And so we'll go quickly through these next couple and I'll wrap it up here. L Street, another beautiful graphic. The big takeaway here was L Street was also recommended for a lane reduction removal. The next slide shows what that looks like. Almost one-to-one in a detailed design that we had laid out. And we've got the table here for L Street as well. And there's a couple, I think there's 3 things here. Pedestrian hybrid beacon, the RRFB, some sign details that obviously would need to be coordinated, but a couple other things in the menu that weren't in that corridor plan. But really one-to-one is the big takeaway here. So to wrap it up, the kind of the ask, I guess, if you will, is where we are in the project right now. We've delivered the pavement preservation work to about 75% complete. That includes all the survey. We're updating that now. Condition assessments on the storm drains, real detailed engineering. That's sitting on the shelf. And then behind that, we have the menu for alternatives. We've developed those to about 30%, if you will, to kind of get to that costing. We took that 30%, put it on top of that 75%. We're almost halfway there is kind of where we are. And so if we had permission to pivot and pick up tools and start working on the corridor plan improvements, we think we could get that to about 75% by the end of this year. And that puts us in that right away phase that's always 24 months that we always hear about. You can't really accelerate that. But if we could get into that by the end of this year, we could get that corridor improvement probably in the world within about 2 years. So the project needs permission though to pick up tools and work on it. That's what we're here for today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Joe. So we've been paused for over a year now at the request of AMATS. And so we think we're at a good place now with the draft Minnesota LI corridor plan that's almost finalized. It should be finalized by the end of this month. And we're seeing how that corridor plan lines up really nicely with the four menu options. And so we just need confirmation from you guys and proof from you guys to pick up pencils and continue moving forward with the new scope as it's outlined in the tip.
Can I ask you to pop back a few slides to the, let's see, I think it's through one more. Member Vaughn, this is your turf. What do you think?
Yeah, it is my turf. I drive this every day. I think a lot of these concepts are exciting. I'll be interested in what the community thinks as this moves forward. But yeah, I think it's good stuff.
I'm curious. So it looks like we would be losing a lane on. L. What would there be a lane reallocation on both I and L?
Yeah, so there's definitely some things, I think we can get to 75%. That doesn't mean any of this is slam dunk yet. So a couple things I'd like to point out is, yeah, the idea on both recommendations is to remove a lane. One big question that's got to get answered right away. Our menu has on-street parking retained in a couple of the corridors. The corridor plan points to that and says, hey, this has to get worked out in design. So they highlight that we don't know what the answer is on like that, for example. So there are some details that need to be worked through the owner agencies. There's definitely some more public involvement work that needs to be done. to kind of figure those improvements out. But the big takeaway would be remove a lane from I and L, and they have to be treated as a couplet. We have to kind of think of them as one facility, if you will.
I know you'll have really strong support for that from the South Addition community. And I think also from downtown, one of the, the issues with L in particular is that it is sort of this straight shot. And there's a lot of speeding, especially noise. That's the complaint that I hear from my constituents a lot, is about the muffler noise. In fact, I think one of the most popular ordinances I ever brought forward as an assembly member was to increase the fines for noise enforcement. I was the sole sponsor, and it passed unanimously, but we heard a lot of public testimony in support for that. Folks are really bothered by noise pollution, and for some reason, it just seems like L is where a lot of that takes place. So anything we can do to calm traffic by design in this area, I think is a win.
I have, this is not, these segments or this couplet, is not on the NHS, correct?
So it is, yeah.
It is.
They were just reclassified as well, efficient streets and highways. They came down from a principal arterial to a minor arterial. They're NHS facilities, yeah. They fit perfectly in that classification.
Does this, being that it is on the NHS, how does this interact with the existing DOT policy around lane reallocations and additional layers of study or analysis being needed for projects?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for asking that. So a chief engineer's directive policy needs to be completed for the work, right? There's also a couple of other things, pedestrian hyperspeed study and RFB studies that need to be completed, which those could happen in parallel as we're working. Corridor plan. So both teams have looked at this. The corridor plan actually took the first step of the chief engineer's directive and did the initial screen. So it passed all that initial screen in their work, and that's what came out of that plan. Our team did a lot of that work with the city and state as well, but we didn't do it formally because I'm not sure that the directive was a policy at the time that we had done that work. So we definitely have to get through that, do an RFP study, and do the pedestrian hybrid beacon study. But everybody has worked on this and is aware that, we're gonna be all right here. It's just like a risky thing. We just have to do the work.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. What I would hate to do is potentially set a public expectation and then could possibly go unmet pending the results of further study and review. So if that feels like we're not treading into dangerous territory, then I feel good about that. Can you flip back to the costing portion of this where it shows the difference in, and then I think I really would love to hear from staff about, what is the flexibility to be able to absorb if we were to go with this like road repurpose and redesign option that puts us pretty squarely outside of I think what this project was initially costed at, and what would we need to do in order to create space to absorb the additional funds needed?
Giving me time, thank you. I have
Sure.
at our 27 through 30 tip to see what we actually have in there. Second. Yeah, so it would be about doubling of the existing costs that we show in there. So we would have to find a spot for it. A lot of it depends on what funding is available from after this tip cycle, if we have any carryover funds that could be available to help absorb it. Another thing is if we have any other project delays that happen in 27, that could be used to help absorb it, or future, depending on when this project gets done. It's a possibility, but I do not have 100% certainty whether we will have the funding available without doing some more research on my end. I feel confident we can make it happen if that is the direction of the policy committee. But there would probably have to just be some conversations later on as we go through and update the cost estimate as part of the tip, and figure out where that funding is coming from.
Thank you.
Could you please comment on sort of segregation of projects? Because it started as a PM project for pretty significant issues, it seems, with the pavement condition. What would it look like if we funded and got the pavement condition resolved without the 2 years of right-of-way acquisition delays? And then simultaneously continued on with design and acquisitions on this project, which sounds like for construction would be like 29 or 30 obligation? Yeah, I don't know if it would make sense, but could you describe how that would look, please?
Yeah, I think we asked that about a year ago. We asked that very specific question. Should we just head down and get this done? There's sidewalk improvements that could be done. It's all that pavement that we need. And we could be almost there now. And the decision was, or the thinking at that time was, there is a lot of rework if you do.
Okay.
Because we're moving a curb line and we'd have to put that pavement down, and 2 years later, we're gonna chew that up, move that curb. And then the big issue we had was with the storm drain. If we go out and do condition assessments on the storm drain, fix the manholes, then we move the curb line, you know, we'd have to figure out not do that. And so it became very hard to fix that storm drain coming across new pavement as well. And so we worked hard on it, and we sort of convinced ourselves, boy, there's a lot at risk that we'd have to chew up. And so we did do that. Boy, we thought hard about it.
And consequences with drainage or any other aspects of it if it is a project that's pushed out 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's still in that pavement preservation space where it's not, and it's certainly not as bad as a lot of roads in town right now. The storm drain is in tough shape, but I should tell you, we went out, inspected all the storm drain, and almost half of it, we couldn't even do a condition assessment on because it was so dirty. We had to go out and clean it again this summer, and we're redoing that assessment. So we're still gathering that information. But it won't fall apart in 2 years.
Knock on something, please.
We are hearing what, we're hearing the same thing about the noise, literally people bouncing off of manhole covers. And the noise from that is something that we've heard.
Is there an opportunity to do, I'm having a hard time pulling up in my head whether the utilities in this area have already been undergrounded or if this is an opportunity to do that at the same time. Has there been any exploration of that? And again, I'm speaking from a place of ignorance. I don't know where the utilities are located.
It's a very fair question. There are utilities. I showed that picture that had, it had a big electrical cabinet on a pole kind of right there, I think by New Sagaya. There definitely are poles there. The undergrounding hasn't even been touched because we're still in a pavement preservation space.
Okay.
So we don't even have permission to go start that or explore that.
Okay.
It's not, the costing doesn't have that in it. So it would definitely be a cost add.
Okay. Is that something that if we were to incorporate, we could potentially compel utilities to support us in that work? How does that? Okay.
Your conversation to be had there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think if it dovetails with, you know, existing right-of-way work and we're already gonna be digging, it feels like this would be an opportunity to incorporate that if that's something that we can get CEA on board with. So, yeah, good to know. Thank you.
Any further discussion on that committee? Oh, public comments. Or we let them sit down. Anything online?
Nothing online.
Okay. Right, anything else?
That's all we had. Thank you.
Okay, yep, thank you for the update.
Do we need to take any formal action on this? Or is we're just
Yes, it is an action. The action is before you to request that you give approval for the project team to move forward based with the project based on the current tip description and include input from the Minnesota IL corridor plan. read you the tip description as well, so you know what that is. Is project would rehabilitate L&I Street from 15th Avenue, to 3rd Avenue to reduce lanes, reduce speeds, intersection improvements, and active transportation improvements. Project design should be consistent with the Minnesota IL corridor plan recommendations.
Question, the graphics I thought showed 5th to 15th. Is it 3rd to 15th? Is that the project limits? Are those the project?
It was 5th to 15th, and then 3rd to 5th recently got added, so they're both the same. One was to 3rd and one was to 5th, and now they're both to 3rd.
Thank you.
Well, do we have a motion on the floor to take this up?
I would move, I guess I'll just read this. I would move. Have the L&I project move forward with the project based on the current tip description, include input from Minnesota IL corridor plan.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Excellent. Okay, further discussion on this topic.
Yeah, is there an opportunity to call out at least exploration of utility undergrounding as part of this project?
I mean, we can ask the project team to look at it, but the big question is, what is the cost gonna be for us in the long run? So I don't see any reason why we couldn't do it, but others may be able to help answer that.
If I may, Mr. Chair, kind of stepping out of my role sitting here, there is typically coordination between the municipality and I believe DOT and the utilities. And the utilities have a requirement in code to spend some portion of their revenue undergrounding. They typically have a 5-year plan. I don't know if this is on the 5-year plan, but there may be an opportunity for the project team to interact with the utilities. And they're going to spend the money somewhere. I don't want to speak for CEA, but they're going to spend that money somewhere. There may be an opportunity for some, synergy here.
That would definitely be my hope, but I don't know whether that's something that
We can certainly have those conversations and open up that door and get our utility section involved in the different utility companies and at least get a feeler and have some initial conversations there.
Yeah, thank you. I think that would be really, really helpful if we're gonna tear up the ground. Let's do as many things at the same time as we possibly can, right? So thank you for that. Further from you.
Any other questions, comments from the committee? So the action before us is really the decision points are being able to program another 5 million of funding towards the project. And then any action on this section in this corridor would be postponed 2 or 3 years. So I think that's ultimately the crux. Well, if giving approval for the project team to keep working on the, I think, option D. Is it option D? 4, thank you. Close. Option 4. So does anyone object to giving direction to the project team to continue with option 4 and programming additional funds? All right, hearing no objections on the motion, what we policy committee approves moving forward with the project based on the current tip description and the added input from the Minnesota INL corridor plan.
And updating the cost, we'll have to do that as part of regular tip action. So we'll capture that in our next one.
That makes sense. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Move on to item 5, action item 5B.
Okay, this is for me. Sorry, I was distracted. We have a letter of support. Alaska Department of Transportation Public Facilities is looking at an AOP, that's an aquatic organism passage grant. They're looking at helping to replace the culverts on the Seward Highway Rabbit Creek area. And so before you is a letter of support from AMATS for that grant that DOT is seeking. The Technical Advisory Committee reviewed this and staff and the TAC recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee?
Yes, I have a comment, whether now or after the motion is made. Again, stepping out of my role on the committee here, the municipality supports this. That whole drainage is important to both us and DOT. And we've been involved in discussions with DOT about this project and the grant applications. Very supportive.
Thank you. Any comments from the public? Anyone online?
No one online.
Okay, we have a motion.
Move to support the letter of support.
Approved.
Approve the letter of support.
Second.
All right, further discussion. Okay, any objections to this motion? Okay, hearing none, the policy committee is approving this letter of support for the culvert AOP, which is the Aquatic Organism Passage Grant Opportunity. Thank you. So we move on to informational items. Did we cover all the action items?
We did, thank you.
Okay. So the first informational item is agenda item 6A. This is the roadmap that we've talked about in previous meetings. Aaron, did you have anything on this to introduce or like?
So this is a standing item that you've asked for as the chair to have on here, and there were comments provided to AMATS policy committee meeting on the boundary update. Staff sent those comments out to everybody, and they are also linked on the agenda for you. I believe the idea was to give you guys an opportunity to review them and see if you had any questions or comments to bring to this meeting for further discussion. Again, it's an informational item, so no action today. Thank you.
And could you clarify where the comments were? Were they public comments or?
No, it's just if you guys had any comments that you wanted to provide today as part of the meeting.
Okay. Okay, sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you said there were additional comments.
Oh, no, it's just for you guys if you have any comments and stuff. It was on there as an informational item for your info.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so following on our ongoing conversations on the metropolitan planning area boundary, at last meeting, it was another same day letter, which we continually commit to improve our advance notice of materials, and we'll keep doing so. And so at the last meeting, we provided a letter on the department's stance on the boundary changes and proposed changes that we've been working through. So it's an itemized list talking over several kind of core principles at the root of disconnect with where we have the boundary from what the policy committee had approved probably a year and a half ago with where we're at now. And we can go through these items. The process that we're hoping to follow is that we can take these items as topics, whether it's where we have incursions into Chugach State Park, or if it pertains to the national highway system, or if it's an area where there isn't population growth, that we can just address each of these and then make decisions and have the documentation on these decisions, and then we can put that back forward through the Department of Law and the governor's office then for approval. I think the challenge that we have here is that the boundary change does need to be a part of and included in the MTP. And it would be most efficient of us to do that before it goes out for public comment, or there will certainly be some rework that may have to happen, whether it's through comments or narrative. I'm not sure of how many projects that are currently in the MTP that are on the cusp of the boundary, one way or the other, but that would be worth looking at. So this letter kind of gives us some background, and happy to talk through these points. This was brought up in the technical advisory committee, and I believe decided to take this up next week as an action item to put forward a recommendation to the policy committee for a decision. And I'd love to understand more from the policy committee members, what you'd like to see to help us get from where we are at now to an agreed upon boundary, and to just start working through these topics. Or if we'd like to wait again for the tax recommendation, or if it's a working session scenario. So I think with that, I'll stop, and then happy to answer any questions from the members.
Real quick for the TAC, they did not actually decide on an action for this at next meeting. So there was a discussion point, and then staff recommended a work session because there seems like there may be some things working through, but there was never really a decision reached on what to do.
Thank you.
Erin, could you review for us, in terms of the federal regulations around MPO boundaries, what is the distinction between areas that must be included versus what can or could be included in an MPO boundary?
Do you mean like what's the minimum versus the maximum?
Mhm.
Okay. Sorry, I just want to make sure I understood what you were saying there. So there is actually federal regulation 23 CFR 450.312 that talks about the MPO boundary. And there are two things. There's the minimum, which the MPA boundary shall encompass the entire existing urbanized area as defined in the Bureau of Census, plus the contiguous area expected to become urbanized within a 20-year forecast period for the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So for us, the area that's currently urbanized is the bowl area. You don't have the boundary up, but it's typically a big blue area that covers almost all of the Anchorage Bowl. And then an area that we expect to become urbanized within the next 20-year period forecast. Right now, that recommendation is the chunk of Chugach Eagle River that I think is often pink in the northern portion. And so that is our minimum. Now, there is a expansion that can go above and beyond that, and that it says the MPA boundary may be further expanded to encompass the entire metropolitan statistical area or combined statistical area as defined by the Office of Management and Budget. And Office of Management Budget is the federal one, not local or state. And when you look at the AMATS's metropolitan statistical area, it is actually the entire municipality of Anchorage and the entire borough, Matsu Borough. Now, there are some caveats there you have to remember because there's further language you have to read. MPO boundaries can't overlap. So we couldn't expand our entire boundary to cover the entirety of the Matsu Borough because there's already an MPO out there. So just kind of keep that in mind. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, one follow-up. So the statistical area is determined by the Office of Management and Budget, that's the maximum possible boundary. So then there are any number of permutations of permissible boundaries that are somewhere in between what shall be encompassed per federal regulation and what could be encompassed as broadly as the statistical area. Am I understanding those correctly, that those are sort of the outer bounds? And then there's enormous flexibility in between.
Correct.
Okay.
And typically you look at what you want to include, things to review that are, things to be incorporated as part of the MPO process, even if it's not part of the urbanized area, for coordination or review, things like that, just making sure that we have a good, complete picture of our transportation system for kind of everything that impacts us within our area. And that can be specific corridors, locations like trailheads where there are traffic generators, other things like that. There's a big variety mix. Like, for example, we have J-Bear in our boundary. Even though we don't plan and program projects on J-Bear, they are a significant impact on our system that we need to account for in our planning process.
And so I'm curious, historically, since the municipality is a de facto unified sort of county and city, and we are a municipality, we're a collective. Why the AMATS boundary has not neatly coincided with the existing boundaries of the muni.
My understanding, based on talking with the previous director, is a lot of that was based on where is kind of the population growth going to be happening. Typically, and where's density going to be happening. So typically the boundary that we have now, the 2010 and earlier boundary, and they're pretty much same as previous ones, was based on kind of where the population was expected to go, plus any important transportation systems that we wanted included in there to account for modeling, impacts on the system, things like that. I think the old saying was we didn't extend further south on the Seward Highway much because there wasn't much density and it was never going to urbanize. But we could go further down if there is a desire, because it fits into that maximum standpoint that it can go above and beyond the urbanized or what we expect to be urbanized in the next 20 years.
Yeah, I think that's helpful context, and I think that those are all the questions I have at this immediate moment. Thank you.
So the challenge with this is that it takes work to go through this. It's very detailed, zooming in, GIS, route by route, and looking at justification, make sure that we're not bifurcating roads between planning responsibilities. Make sure we're not having a boundary go in a center line of a road. So there just is work that we have to do. So we had, and I thought we had discussed the direction that staff of AMATS and staff of DOT would get together and work on this to help provide information together with the TAC, and said that at previous meetings. But I also understand that staff doesn't want to at this time have those meetings. So I'm a bit at a loss as to how we move forward, because we still need to have a boundary that we can evaluate and move forward. So I'm looking a little bit for direction here. We need to start taking action items on these things because they're not going to solve themselves, and we will not have an MPP approved if this is not able to be resolved within the next couple, I guess, 3 months when it goes up for public comment. September is when you want public comment.
We have an approved boundary at this point.
You do not have an approved boundary,
We have a
unfortunately.
policy committee approved boundary.
But sadly, it's the governor of Alaska that actually approves the boundary.
He actually gives concurrence to it.
He approves the boundary and he has not. So until that point, we do not actually have an approved boundary. We have one that the policy committee has approved for submission to the governor's office, which has not yet happened.
Okay.
And
so-
we've been given clear direction back from the Attorney General's office about what changes should be made. And that's what we've been talking through since I've sat in this chair and prior to that. So my request is that we start working through these items as actions, understanding we just have to. Maybe we end up at the same boundary, but we still need the justification that can be shared to explain why these changes are occurring outside of population increases.
Is the governor specifically asking for a line-by-line justification of every roadway in Anchorage?
Yeah, the Attorney General's office who advises the governor and the Commissioner's office who advises the governor on these matters.
So
Both need the detailed justification for why we're encroaching into Chugach State Park and why we're also expanding into interstate access.
and why, so I appreciate that this letter came from you outlining some of the questions that need to be addressed. I think part of the tension here is that this body has done its work. Like we have developed a boundary that the policy committee feels comfortable with and approves. And it's challenging to have a governor come back and say, we would like for you to do a whole lot of extra work. We'd like for you to duplicate work you've already done and provide justification for something that quite frankly should, in my estimation, be self-evident as to why we would include parcels or parts of Anchorage that pertain to our municipality that are a part of us. In fact, our entire municipality is not inside of the AMATS boundaries. We've made some very clear decisions about why parts of Anchorage are not within the AMATS boundary. And so to be asked to provide this level of a justification for inclusion when federal regulation clearly states that we have the authority and the capacity to move beyond what is the current urbanized area and what is expected to become urbanized within a period of time, feels like an exercise in wasting everyone's time. And so it's that, I think that's probably why it feels like we're sitting here sort of twiddling our thumbs, because the issue is not within this committee. The issue is with the governor.
And respectfully, the governor has not seen the boundary. It has not yet been forwarded to the governor's office because the state agencies and departments that are involved are not making the recommendation that it be approved, because while we may have talked about it, the actual detailed justification as to why these expansions are occurring have not approved.
But the boundary hasn't expanded. Our boundary's been the same for,
Absolutely expanded.
how long has our boundary been the same, Aaron?
Well, it's hard to say, but by and large, most of it has been the same since at least the early 2000s. There's been small changes over time due to the urbanized areas growing. But even with this current boundary, there were minor adjustments. A couple of miles of boundary was widened on the south, and the rest was cleanup throughout. And yeah.
We'll be loving to show like a presentation, and maybe that's where a work session can come in, so we can show you where those expansions exist if you don't know, because there certainly are expansions. In a couple miles to the south is the Seward Highway, where we have had some pretty significant financial repercussions of where our joint planning authorities are not aligning, which is all very acceptable and a normal part of the process. But when we're making those expansions without justification as to how that benefits the transportation system, then are we really doing our due diligence and our jobs? So what we've been tasked to do is to go back and look through these challenges and be able to justify in writing with data why they're occurring, which we don't have at this time. And we're happy to do the work, but we had hoped to do this jointly with the municipality. The states could propose, and we have an acceptable boundary, and we don't have detailed feedback on why that isn't acceptable. So just need to have these conversations.
I think part of the challenge here is it doesn't really sound like a conversation. It sounds like a mandate, or.
I got brief Addies. I need.
Sure. Go for it. Yes, by all means.
Is there water here?
We don't have cups or anything in here. Hold on, let me see if I can find you one.
Sorry, I'm still.
No, I'll see if I can find you one over here.
Yeah.
Hi, they're in policy committee meeting. It should be done pretty soon.
This is not a promotional opportunity.
You wanted to make
Thank you.
I know, word from our
I know.
sponsors.
It was just the cup I found in the room. Anything else?
Thanks, everyone. Okay, we're back. Member Baldwin Day.
Yes, I was saying, so I think that it doesn't really feel like a conversation so much as a directive, and the subtext of the communication that it seems like we're receiving from whomever, whether it's, you as a representative of DOT or the Department of Law or whomever. I mean, it seems like this is coming across as, we will not approve your boundary unless it is the boundary that we like. And that doesn't feel collaborative. It doesn't feel like an invitation to a dialogue. It feels like we are going to ask you for a justification. We're going to summarily reject the justification, and we're going to hold your boundary hostage because we don't like other things. And that doesn't feel collaborative. That doesn't feel like it's a process by which AMATS, or certainly the municipality of Anchorage, stands to gain much from engagement. And so I think I would request some clarification as to whether this is indeed a collaborative process or whether it is thinly veiled communication from the governor stating his intent to withhold concurrence on a boundary until such time as the boundary is what he wants or what the powers that be may desire to see for AMATS. It's difficult to engage in a conversation when it feels like there's a foregone conclusion. And I think that is my sticking point here. Is I'm not sure how any justification or a response that is provided will be managed or will be received.
Yeah, thank you. So just a couple things. First of all, development of the initial proposed boundary, it certainly was collaborative. And I would expect that was about 3 years ago that we began between the state and the municipality going through the boundaries, and our teams were coming together to propose based on the updated census data what the best course of action was for a proposal. There have been a lot of changes since that time within federal regulation, interpretation of regulation, and how project delivery has unfolded in the state. That has required us to reevaluate and look at more closely our planning documents, including the STIP, which you have all seen us go in great detail into the STIP. We've looked in great detail into the TIP approval processes and the formatting of the TIPs. We've done a very wholesale, healthy evaluation of our planning products and deliverables. That includes the boundary, which is a part of that, and the operating agreements, which is another topic where we still need to update some things on our boundary operating agreements. So getting to this point, even though the policy committee had about 2 years ago, I apologize, I don't have the date, approved and put forward a recommended boundary, there's still other things that do have to happen for due diligence. So I apologize if it seems like it's not collaborative. From my perspective, I feel we've been begging for engagement on this topic from the municipality and AMAT staff so that we could come to and collaborate and come to consensus. We've already identified, just in asking more questions and looking at the maps, the reasoning for where there are expansions, and it's totally logical. So that works great. So then we can map that out when we document it and we can move on to the next. We've had a conversation with DNR to begin to work through what any changes in the boundary into Chugach State Park may mean, positive or negative for DNR planning processes. And so these were just the engagements that we wanted to have happen. And certain parts of the proposed boundary, such as down into the port, those were all parties concurred. So in addition to the city, the AMAT staff, this committee, and the state, we all do need to come to consensus, and the state is an equal partner in that. The state does also need to concur that these changes aren't going to impact our ability to run our program as well. So we all have a decision here. We have been asserting our areas of concern and have been consistent in that. And because we have areas of concern, we're being accused of being, I don't know, maybe demanding, but I'm just asking that we do start working through this. And if we, through this documentation process, come to the same conclusion, that's great. If we need to change what we have provided as a proposed boundary, then we can just go through this in a logical or a sequential manner. But that process does need to be revisited. It's certainly not a directive. We all have, as committee members, we all have a choice in how seriously we want to take this. The repercussions of which is not having an approved boundary or an approved MTP at the end of the year, going back to the consequences that Mr. Young spoke to earlier.
I just want to point out, Member Boland has a hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Member Boland, can you please?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
contribute?
thank you. Yep. I would be interested maybe in hearing from Mr. Colhase, his perspective too, but the sense that I'm getting is that the majority of the policy committee is not really interested in relitigating or revisiting our current boundary. And so, yeah, I just don't know whether it's worth to even try to unpack any of this. I think myself, my own personal perspective, but probably the majority of the policy committee is fine continuing to work under the current recommended and current adopted boundary. I guess one question, so I think you were getting at it there a little bit, Chair Keith, but a question for Aaron. So if the governor were not to concur, I guess what is the normal process? Getting, how often do we make changes or sort of go through providing justification for our current boundaries? And then what happens if the governor were not to concur?
It is a requirement to update our boundary or to relook at our boundary after each census is done. In case any of the urbanized areas have expanded and you need to make sure that those urbanized areas are included in your boundary. I believe we've made small changes over the years through 2000, 2010, the current one right now. And so in terms of justification that we've sent previously, I haven't been able to find much. So we don't really have a process written out of how we develop our boundary every time. It looks like what we do is we just take the current existing boundary and then update it based on any changes that have been made to the census, or if we're trying to clean up the boundary to make it easier for people to understand. And then what happens if the governor doesn't give his concurrence approval to the boundary? I don't know. You'd have to get that information from the Federal Highway Administration. My understanding is it's never happened before. So we would have to figure out what that means.
Okay, if I might follow up, Madam Chair. So does a boundary change, Aaron, to your understanding, necessitate that we open up other aspects of the operating agreement?
No, we've been told by FHWA we are not required to open our operating agreement as part of the boundary work.
Okay. Okay, that's all my questions for now. Thank you.
And just a couple follow-ups is that we do know the MTP has to include the approved boundary in its submission at the end of the year. So when we talk about the impacts of not having an MTP by year end, the boundary is directly connected to that. And I do agree still some comments back from Federal Highways would be great, but as Mr. Young and Ellen has said, they're not really clear either. So putting something in writing from them isn't, something that we've been able to receive, but they're just encouraging us to continue to work together to get to that point. And one thing to be clear about too is the last approved boundary that we have on the record that the governor has approved is 2010, I believe. So if we're going to be moving forward with our current boundary, it would be the 2010 boundary. And it could be 2014 that we updated it from the 2010 census data. Do you recall the year of the
Well,
last?
there were two things. So one, they did the boundary update, and then later on they got, I believe what happened is that there was a section of urbanized area that extends out into the inlet that was not included in the boundary, and it is federally required to be included. So in 2014, they had to go back and update it to extend that small portion. It's to the, sorry, we don't have the boundary open, but if you look at Anchorage, the moose head on the left, it's like the beard, where the beard area or the lower jaw area would be. It extends out into the mud flats. We have to include it in our boundary. So I think that was what was tweaked with the 2014 change.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and the lack of a documented process, that was one of the things we had discussed earlier that we wanted to do so that we would make this a lot more transparent and clear, easier for staff to help document decisions on the policy committee on these individual topics, and how as a state and municipality in the AMATS forum can make this an easier process for the public and everything. I think that's a must action as we have takeaways from this. This is the same process that FAST MPO had gone through. So that has now been moving forward. I believe it's already approved by the governor's office. So
Well, I guess my question would be then, how would you like to receive feedback on the May 21 memo? Because I think there are some baked in assumptions in this memo that I mean, certainly I would disagree with the premise of some of these items. And I'm not sure how you or the commissioner would like to receive feedback on the underlying assumptions, which I think is really where we're running into problems. And I also think it would be helpful to understand, it is still unclear to me why or what exactly is the governor or the Department of Law's issue. Have we had functional challenges related to the MPO boundary? What is the problem that we are trying to solve with this exercise? To my way of thinking, additional layers of bureaucratic cleanup is not a good enough I love that that's your ringtone. Additional layers of bureaucratic cleanup is not a good enough reason to expend this amount of time and energy trying to resolve something. I think it would be far more effective if we actually understood what's the beef. Like, what is the problem that we are trying to solve here? And rather than coding it in layers of like fluffy language and requests for clarity, if we could just get to the heart of like, what is the sticky wicket, then maybe we could get someplace. But I think the fact that this has been veiled in layers of like superfluous language and a lot of jargon has made it really difficult to understand what's at stake, like what is really at issue. And then maybe we could talk about that. But again, without understanding what the problem is that we are trying to solve and having that problem itself identified clearly and agreed upon, I think it's really difficult to make progress on anything if we can't agree on what it is that we're trying to solve.
So in the past few years, and we can provide more specific examples, because of the MPO or the joint planning authority between the state and the cities, several projects have been postponed, like the Chena Bridges up in Fairbanks, where that was a project that was outside of the MPA. It was vetoed through the policy board process. That postponed construction. A contractor that was under contract to do that work, it was pushed out. It did get resolved after a year of extensive travel time, working with federal highways before they issued that direction that indeed this was a project that should move forward. It just a lot of delays. I wrote and provided clarifying information at the last meeting as well about the Safer Seward Highway project. And because that project was then removed from the MTP, the planning phase of that project, the environmental document, which we need in order to clarify the development and the future design of that project, that is now at risk and of federal funds as well. So when we're talking about increasing this, say the safer along the Seward Highway, that problem becomes even more challenging to work through. So if we have justification as to how and why that should be included, that's why we're asking for dialogue. We just don't really understand it. And if it justifies or warrants that risk to contracting community, the public, when we need to make improvements and so on. So the justification for us is real. It's not bureaucratic administration, but not wanting to be in any way directive. We're just asking to come to the table and walk us through why this is the case and make sure we all understand the consequences and that what we have to, just what we will go through that's different. And then I think we can get to where we need to go. But those are just some examples I could come up with. More, there's bridge projects and
Are there any other projects that have been, so the only one that I've heard mention of that has any bearing?
Really quickly, sorry, but we have 3 minutes left of the meeting, so I just want to remind you guys that we have that.
Thank you. And I actually am going to need to go very promptly. You know, the fact that the Safer Seward Highway is the only project that has been pointed to as something that's been at issue with respect to the MPO boundary, I think is part of the challenge here. And what is what is challenging about that is that, again, this is the only thing, this is the only problem, and I use air like rabbit ear quotes. This is the only problem that anyone has been able to point to say, this is why our boundary deserves review. And yet, at the same time, the letter that we received, number 7, says boundary decisions should be separated from individual project disagreements. And so that feels disingenuous because the only thing that has been brought forward as a rationale for talking about our boundary is the Safer Seward Highway. And yet we're being told that individual project disagreements should be separate from boundary decisions. That feels like talking out both sides of the mouth. So
I respectfully with the committee at one time and increased the boundary to specifically the Safer Seward Highway and nothing else.
Well, as I understand it, the expansion of the boundary had nothing to do with the Safer Seward Highway. If in fact there was, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Erin, a portion of the Safer Seward Highway project would have been in the MPO boundary regardless of any other changes. Correct. Okay, so that's that. We would have been in this situation even if those additional 2.1 miles, what would,
I think it was like 0.8 or something.
Yeah, even if that 0.8 mile, we'll call it a mile expansion had not happened, the Safer Seward Highway project would still have fallen within the purview of the MPO. And so again, this is where I want us to talk about, like, let's talk about the thing that we need to talk about rather than talking around the thing we need to talk about. And
We have 1 minute left.
Yeah, thank you. So before we, thank you for the conversation. This is what we've been asking for. So we appreciate that. There's no other way to move forward unless we can work through these things. Is there a motion to extend by probably 5 minutes to wrap up, or do we have a hard stop? Or just close the meeting?
Unfortunately, I have to leave it within a couple minutes here.
I do as well. I have a work session back at City Hall at 3:15. So
Okay, excellent. So public comments. Is there anything that you could please keep comments to 20 seconds? So
Briefly,
Or
before we
tweets.
log off, if I
Yeah,
could, Madam
thank you.
Chair, just because I had my hand up. I'm wondering, Aaron, could we bring an action item to the next meeting for the policy committee to vote on, essentially saying that we affirm and uphold our current boundary?
Yes, I can go ahead and add that.
Okay, thanks.
I would, well, we're at close, but the language of that would be helpful to keep it a bit more open, but making a decision on the boundary would certainly be excellent as an action item.
Yeah, we're done. We're out of time.
Okay, so, given that, thanks everyone for your time. Enjoy the long weekend. The meeting is adjourned.
You go. I'm making.
Oh, it's good. We all have.